But as most of you probably know, it's not possible to be everything to everyone at all times. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we shall begin. So my husband, this Franstead Strategies is the company that my husband and I created to share, to house all of this information that we have created. If you have questions about that, we can go over that at the end. But I'm going to get started here. So this quote, I think, is fabulous for what we've discussed. If you've ever had anybody say to you, I don't have time to do that, essentially what that means is they don't want to make time. And that's fine. But understand that time cannot be created or destroyed. It's like energy. It's not something you can create more of. You have to find more of it. So what does that mean? Basically, I don't know if you've ever heard of in my business, we have these different stages of retirement. And this is kind of a play on that. In the top right corner here, you have your go-go years. And each of these stages kind of depict what your priorities are going to look like, because that's sort of the foundation for everything we're going to talk about. These go-go years are your years right out of college, probably, or law school or medical school or wherever. These are the years where you hit the ground running with your career or whatever it is that you're doing in life. You have a lot of time. Maybe you're working 8 hours a day, you're or 10 or 12 or 14 in some cases. You're going to see friends afterwards. You're doing a lot of socialization, and you're hitting everything at a dead run. Then that top left box, your glow go years. I'm told that some women glow when they're pregnant. I never did. But when you are having children and doing all the other things you're trying to do, there is a period of time of adjustment. I would say it's probably about 5 years where you're trying to, adjust your new identity of this. I'm a mother, and maybe you're working or volunteering. You're not, maybe you're not getting paid for the work that you do, but you're adjusting from this go to now I have all these kids. And then in the bottom or the middle right, you have the grow go years where things kind of change a little bit. These kids are a little bit older, maybe they're in high school. They don't take less time. I'm told bigger kids, bigger problems. They don't take less time, but they're maybe less physically time consuming. So you're not chasing a 2-year-old around. You're now trying to help a 16-year-old or 17-year-old with college applications or whatever the case may be. And your time looks different. Then that middle left is my personal favorite, the Merlot go years. I sort of envision these years as the years when your kids leave the house and you can have a glass of wine in peace. Maybe that's not the case, but at least, my parents, when this happened to them, they loved it. They had so much time to spend together. It was just them again, and they've had so much fun going places and doing things that they didn't get an opportunity to do when they were kids in the house. And so again, your priorities look very different when there aren't kids at home anymore. Then bottom right there, the slow go years. Maybe at this point you're retired. You might be volunteering or helping out at your church or whatever the case may be, but you're not working for money. You're not trying to prove anything to anybody. There's just slower, simpler years. And then at the end, the no-go years. This is towards the end of your life. Maybe you're in full-time care. All of these stages look very different when it comes to your time and your priorities. So why is that important? On the left-hand side here, you have a typical bar chart. You have different times to sleep, work, eat, commute, maybe not with COVID, and exercise, maybe if that's your thing. But this place I've highlighted in red, that's all the extra time in your day. What do you use that for? So this bar chart is interesting because this is how a lot of people see their time. I can just continue to add more time onto these bars and I will have more time to do more things. But like I said at the beginning, time can't be created or destroyed. You can't just add more things into your day. In the Navy, we called people who made things happen. They were the meat grinders. I don't know if you've ever been to a butcher shop and seen how they make sausage, or maybe on Food Network. It's like a big metal container, and they put all of the different meats and spices and things into it, and then it gets ground through, and then at the bottom comes out a very beautiful edible sausage. So the idea here is that all the junk goes in the top and something edible and palatable comes out the bottom. So hence the meat grinders. That's what I did in the Navy. That's what my husband did in the Navy, which made us actually a pretty good pair. But the point is that my husband, when I was particularly stressed out one day, um, said, "Listen," and this is probably pretty typical of most women. When you put stuff into your meat grinder, you pile it up high and just hope everything gets in. He said, when I have too much stuff in my meat grinder, things fall off the sides, which is pretty typical for a man. Like, well, I just didn't make it to pick up today, like I just didn't make it. I just didn't get it to happen. But for a lot of women who generally bear the brunt of the child rearing responsibilities, can't just forget to pick up your kid at school. So a lot of women have this basket where things just get piled up on top, and a lot of times your gears get ground down because there's so much that you're trying to keep in this small basket. So why do I bring that up? And the point here is that I think there might be time that you don't realize what you're doing with it. So on the right is what time, this pie chart is what time your time actually looks like. If you take time from one thing, if you add time somewhere, you're taking time from something else. So if you have to work more, maybe you're sleeping less. If you have to exercise more, maybe you're working less, or whatever. There are trade-offs. It's not the bar chart on the left is not possible. You can't just keep adding on to things. It's more like the right, where if you add something, you're taking away from something else. So the basis of this is prioritization. This red section that I've highlighted, basically what I've done here is I have 7 hours for sleep, 8 hours for work, 2 hours for eating, if you eat 3 meals a day, hour and a half for commute, and maybe an hour for exercise. Anyway, all this worked out to about 4 extra hours in your day. And that's what that red highlighted section is. And a lot of people have said to me when I've gone over these exercises with them, I don't have 4 extra hours in my day. That looks about right for me. I sleep 7 hours, I work 8, but I don't have 4 extra hours in my day when I come home. And I think that's because a lot of people don't realize what they're doing with their day. And this is where priorities and understanding your schedule comes in. So the next thing we're going to do is a little activity. You don't have to have your camera on for this, but this is going to be a little bit interactive. I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer all of these questions. And the reason I only give you 1 minute is because the answers to these questions should be right off the top of your head. If they're not, then if you have to think too hard about them, that it's probably not as important to you as you think it is. So I'm going to give everybody 1 minute starting now. Looking for the Jeopardy theme song here. Okay, that's your minute. So The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send everybody into breakout rooms with 2 to 3 people in a breakout room. Again, you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to be seen. Sometimes I come to these things and I'm folding laundry at the same time or whatever the case may be. So what I want you to do is share. If you don't want to, if you think this is too personal, totally fine. But this is a case of once you speak it into existence, you feel more motivated to follow through on these things. So what I want you to do is in your group, share the answers to these questions. And hang on here, let me recreate. There we go. All right. I'm going to just automatically assign people at random to all of these different rooms. And I will give you 5 to 6 minutes in that room, and then we'll all come back together. If you've never done this, it'll give you a 60-second warning before you come back. Ready, set, go. We're still getting everybody back. I think we still have a couple more minutes for everybody to, or a couple more seconds for everybody to join us, and then we will continue. Okay, I think we got everybody back now. If yeah, it looks like we got everybody back. Um, so I hope everybody enjoyed kind of sharing those things. The reason that I wanted to talk about these things is because it is the foundation for everything you're going to do. I'll share mine with you just so you have an idea of what mine looks like. Um, Family, I literally changed careers for family. Being an expert in my field is something that I really want to accomplish. And then I wish I had more time to train for competition. If you know anything about weightlifting, it takes a lot of hours because there's only so many heavy things that you can lift in a day. Um, so those are the things that I wish that I had more time to do. And those are my priorities. So the reason priorities are so important is because only by having your priorities crystal clear in your head can you begin the process to be more efficient with your time. Um, it is critical that you know what your priorities are so that you can begin the process. Now, and this process is actually relatively time intensive. This is the easiest part of this whole entire exercise. My husband and I actually created like a priorities workbook to kind of find inefficiencies in our time. And it looks a little bit like this. So self-reflection is the piece that we just finished. And that first part that takes 1 minute to find out, all the answers to those three questions is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more thought that you can put into, are these things really possible? For example, I always wanted to be a doctor. I'm never going to be a doctor. I am way too far along in my in my life to be a doctor. So putting that down would be kind of an unrealistic goal for me to have. So understanding if these goals and these things you really want to do are realistic. Somebody mentioned in one of the groups that one of the things they really wish they could do was travel. Not a lot of that going on right now with COVID. And so sometimes these things just aren't really possible. So what are the other things that you're going to do in place of that? So once you have all that information, you can then begin to find the inefficiencies in your day. And the way that we do this is by planning out your day in 15-minute increments. And a lot of people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, especially because I have 3 kids. I'm getting a master's. I'm working. I have to be wife and mom and all these things, and play dates and the whole 9 yards. People go, how is that even possible? Um, but those 15-minute increments are actually teaching you a lot about yourself. And so particularly it's important to when things are slipping. And so like I do this, I'm running a multi-million-dollar company, and when things are not as efficient as they should be, and we're not, meeting all of our requirements, and there's various different ways in my business to see the metrics on that. But when that's not happening, I have all of our employees write down in 15-minute increments what they're doing, because 15 minutes, you can do a lot in 15 minutes, surprising amount in 15 minutes. Just ask a 2-year-old who's been alone for 15 minutes. So if you don't know what you're doing with your time, this is a great way to find out. So for example, if you sit down at your desk and you're trying, and we're talking in like a work situation, you're sitting at your desk and you're maybe you're chatting with a colleague because you just can't get motivated to start working, and that takes 15, 20, 30 minutes. Well, there's 30 minutes. Maybe it's not wasted because you're a social creature. But if you have to have a deadline or a meeting you need to get to, that's wasted time. So write down every 15 minutes of your day. And you can use a planner, you can use whatever you want for this. But write down those 15 minutes, and it's hard. It is really hard. But if you choose to do hard things in life, for example, if you if you decide not to go with the flow, like you don't want life to throw things at you and not be prepared. If you don't want to be just another cog in the wheel, if you choose to do hard things, it requires planning and work. If you choose to do hard things, you need a plan. You need a roadmap to reach that destination. And that's where this last piece, action, comes into play. Once you have your priorities, then you're finding out where the inefficiencies are in your time, and then you're reordering them and putting them into action. Again, I'll send Teresa the kind of workbook that we use for this. I don't have enough time to go through like line item by line item because it takes a long time. But this is the broad overview. These are the major broad brushstrokes that we use to come up with our plans and reduce inefficiencies. As a quick example, I found once I started my master's program, I found that I spent, even during COVID, an hour in the car a day, even during COVID, which really shocked me and surprised me, and sometimes even longer than that. And so what I started doing was listening to lectures from my master's program while I was driving in the car. My kids know all of my professors. And maybe they'll be like, income tax experts by the time this is all said and done. But it's a great way to not waste the time that I'm given. Or if, maybe you, another thing I used to do before COVID was maybe you have like meditations or prayers or things like that. Do those in the car. I'm sure a lot of you do. The car is a great place to get a lot of stuff done. So things like that are ways by doing that 15-minute increments, that's a way you can realize that, wow, maybe you didn't know you were spending a whole hour a day in the car. It's a great way to find inefficiencies and then be able to change them once you know what those are. And then finally, this requires continuous evaluation and constant change. My husband and I had a great plan at the start of 2020. It got derailed pretty quickly. I'm pretty sure COVID threw everybody for a loop, but that's what this continuous evaluation is for. And my husband and I sat down at the kitchen table and redid everything. And it's a lot of work, but my husband and I are able to accomplish a lot of things because we have a plan. I'm almost out of time here. Yeah. So this is pretty self-explanatory. There's no shortcuts. There are tips and tricks, but there is no way to make it to the top and to complete all of your goals without sorry, somebody just sent a text here or a chat thingy. I'll answer questions in just a minute. You're the only one who can make this happen. Nobody can do anything for you. The only exception I would say is that if you can pay somebody to do something for you, for example, housekeeping. I pay somebody to clean my house because my time is worth more. And especially if I want to spend more time with my children, I'd rather spend it with them than cleaning the house. So things like that are little tips and tricks, but there are no shortcuts to putting in the work and making it to the top of whatever goal it is that you have. And then these are a couple of great books that I wanted to recommend if you're interested in learning more about them, more about this type of stuff. Couples That Work has some really great tools in it. She talks about like a spousal contract, particularly if you're a dual working family or a couple, which many are, particularly at the beginning of your marriage. Parents Who Lead is really great, and when it talks about like examples to show your children. And then Good to Great is based on making great businesses, but it actually has a lot of really interesting, applicable information to people and to families. All of these books have some level of political correctness in them, is what it is, but they have great tools. And then I am sorry, Teresa, I went a little bit over, but that is the end.
Thank you very much, Kara. So Q&A. What do you prefer, Kara? That they ask you verbally, that they use the chat option, or
Whoops. I think if you want to use the chat, that's fine. Some people find that they don't want to be the center of attention if they're asking questions. You can do that. Or if you want to raise your hand or talk or whatever the case may be, I'm open to either, whichever feels more comfortable for you. Somebody did ask a chat question here. Um, how do you figure out how much time is wasted on the phone? Um, it sort of depends on, are you using the phone for work purposes? Are you using the phone for social purposes? Those are the different categories that I would kind of put that. Oh, you mean, I'm wondering if you meaning like Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. Um, my phone actually tells me how much time uh, I'm spending on my phone. So at the end of the week, it'll tell me. Most phones have some kind of like how much time you spent in each app. Um, my numbers were insane at the end of the holiday. I think I spent like several hours a day on Instagram, but it was so wonderful. Um, but you can also download apps too to tell you how much time you're wasting on the on those apps and things like that. And they do keep you honest. They really do. Um, so next, how can we know if goals are realistic? How do we evaluate on a daily, weekly basis? So realistic. I don't know if you've ever heard of the SMART goals. That's like a formula you can use. Realistic. Are you trying to be the next CEO of Amazon next year, or how? I mean, I think there's some of this is common sense, which I'm assuming you've already passed the common sense test, and you're asking about realistic based on your specific circumstances. And for that, I would say you need a mentor. Everybody needs a mentor. And they can kind of help you from an objective point of view. Or, maybe you don't have a formal mentor, but you have somebody you trust and you can ask questions like, hey, is it realistic for me to be able to do this PhD program while I'm pregnant? Well, do you know anybody else who's done that? Or maybe somebody does. Um, Specific circumstances are harder for general advice because they are so specific. Um, there are, like, in my situation, there are many, many women who have children while they're in the military. It is not something I wanted to do. Military, you deploy at a moment's notice, and I just didn't want to buy kids. So, um, and I came to that conclusion while talking to many people who had children while they were in the military. So, um, quick answer for that is find a mentor, find somebody who's done what you're looking to do. Um, Chief takeaway from my time spent in the military. I get asked this question a lot, and the answer always startles people a little bit. Nothing's an emergency. Um, and I think when you're in kind of your day-to-day life, it's easy to get wrapped up in your own problems and your own issues, and what's going on. And uh but in reality, there's not too many situations where somebody's going to lose life or limb. And in the military, I was placed in situations like, although it was like, being in the military, the job I did wasn't super dangerous, but I could have, you know gotten into some trouble. um but it was always this idea that you're trying to protect the people who work for you. So when people ask me like, gosh, why aren't you stressed about, X, Y, or Z, or Y, this is really, important. It's like, yes, it's important, and I'm going to make it happen, but I don't need to stress about it because no one's going to die. So it's a very extreme example. But it does give you perspective. Um, okay. Many people do not have complete buy-in from family members on their goals. Do you have any tips for them? Yeah, so not from personal experience, but from others I'm friends with or I've mentored. I'm very close to my family, but I have friends and colleagues who are not. And if your goals are not something that your family agrees with, um, it's tough. And there's no way around how difficult that is, particularly if the family has their feet set in concrete. Um, if you're also determined that this is something you're going to do, like in the case of one of my friends, his family required that he be a doctor, and that was pretty much the only option. And he became an engineer, but that was not what his family did. And so they were pretty upset with him. But then once they actually stopped talking to him. This was like a cultural thing for them. But once he had children, they really wanted to be involved with the children. So I would say keep lines of communication open with your family. It was really hard on this particular friend when the family shut down communication. And I think that you can agree to disagree, but don't shut down the lines of communication. Hopefully your situation is not that serious. But come to an understanding that you may not get support from them, and go find a mentor who will help you achieve those goals. Can your method program work for more artistic creative people who do not do well with schedule? Do not do well with schedule. So yes, but the artistic creative people, I mean, if you're talking about you're actually an artist, maybe you're into like artists, like canvas painting artists, and you need lots of time thinking about what you're going to create. Then set aside blocks of time where you're only going to think about that. I do have some artist friends who say today's the day I'm going to sit down and do it. But they just say today's the day, and they're all over the place the whole day. So I would say that it's more, you need to set aside maybe, so for this 1 hour, I'm going to focus entirely on my creative process. And then for 1 hour, I'm going to wander around, or whatever it is that gets you in the creative flow. And then the next hour, I'm going to focus on the process. I think if, maybe not a super strict schedule, but at least set aside one block of time during your day to create, or whatever it is you do. I think this doesn't necessarily apply to musicians because they have to spend a lot of time practicing and actually doing. But yeah. Other questions? Role of husband, like my husband. So this is key. There is absolutely no way that I could do what I do without my husband being 100% bought into what we're trying to accomplish. My husband and I are really big on education. It's important for us both to be well read and educated in order to educate our children. My kids are really strong willed, and like to the point where we had parent teacher conferences a couple of weeks ago. And my oldest daughter's teacher said, I'm okay with how strong-willed she is. I'm okay with this because when she's bringing her courtroom to order and banging her gavel, she's going to need it. And I was like, okay, all right. I'm not sure if that's a compliment, but I'm going to take it as one. It's important for both parents to be on board to raise a child in that way and accomplish everything else you want to accomplish on your own. And for me, it is family that's the most important thing. And so I have to have, if I'm not able to be with my kids and, teach them what needs to be taught, or, particularly now during COVID where it's just a nightmare with the virtual stuff, my husband will tag team. I'll take a day. He has a client meeting, so I'll jump in at 10 and he'll come back when he's done, and then I'll jump in and he'll jump in and all that kind of stuff. And then like when I like for tonight, I was getting ready for this talk and we were having dinner and he said, have you done your last run through yet? And I said, no, because we had an interesting afternoon. Somebody didn't want a nap. And he said, what do you need? What do you need? And he says that all the time to me. What do you need? Um, so I think the more you can get your husband on board with your goals, the more you can get them to support you and understand what they need to do to help you. Also, really big tip, if you're expecting them to figure it out on their own, they will never figure it out on their own. You have to be very clear what you need from them, which is why now we're at the point where he says, what do you need? Which means I get to tell him directly exactly what I need him to do. And that meant he gave the kids a bath and all that kind of stuff. So I got some more questions rolling in here. What should we look for in a mentor? That's a really tough question because I would say the first thing that I look for is values. Um, and I do think like, for example, I know a bunch of people who share my values, but I don't necessarily know people who share my values who are doing what I'm doing. Um, and that's hard because there are people who who may know more about what you want to do who don't share your values. So I have one of my mentors is the most unbelievable woman I've ever met in my life, but she gave up having a family in order to make her career work. Like she didn't end up having any children. And she sacrificed that to make her career work. And I can't think of anything I would rather not ever sacrifice than my own family. But she has great career advice. So this is one of the things actually this is copyrighted by my mother. It's called a personal board of directors. So you may not have one mentor that satisfies all the buckets you need help with in your life. So like my mom is a fabulous mentor. She's an entrepreneur, business owner, and she has done a lot. She has 4 kids who are all successful. We all have great family relationships. There's a lot that she's done that I want to emulate in my life. But she's also my mother and therefore a little bit biased sometimes. So there are other people who I go to ask for maybe more cutthroat career advice. And then what I end up doing is somewhere between the two. And my mom didn't work for a while she was home with the kids. And now there weren't really part-time options back then. But there's a lot of options now. And so, but anyway, I would say if you can find one mentor who has everything you need, you have found a treasure. Better it would be if you could find a board of directors, somebody who you go to for maybe spiritual things, somebody who you go to for career advice, because maybe you are one of those artistic types, and the artistic types don't their core beliefs don't mesh with some of your core beliefs, even though you both have that, you fit into that artistic crowd. So maybe you go to somebody else for your spiritual needs and your somebody else who has your values if you're, have questions about those kinds of things. But when it comes to career advice, maybe you talk to people who you're interested, who's in your career field. I would say particularly the PhD types, people who are getting doctorates and in higher education. This one's really tough because at least all my friends and family who are in higher education, there tends to be this sort of I wouldn't call it like one mindset that we are. I don't want to get into politics here. So there tends to be one type of person that you can be, and then if you disagree, you're automatically labeled, and those types of people are not people who you want giving you certain types of advice. So career advice, maybe the head of your department, but maybe he doesn't agree with you on 100 other things, and but he has the job you want. So you go to him to figure out how to become the chair of the history department, but you don't ask him for advice on your teenage daughter who wants a boyfriend. Um, so I hope that answers your question. That's sort of a really long answer, but personal board of directors can probably meet more of those marks than one person in particular. I have quite a few people who I go to for different types of advice. Um, is 15 minutes the optimal time slot to monitor on a daily basis? How would weekends work? Would they be just as structured? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. It depends on how hard your goals are. For me and my family, my weekends are just as structured. My husband and I don't watch a lot of TV, although we did over the holidays. It was wonderful. But we don't tend to have time. So, especially if we want to have time for our personal relationships. And I have young kids. So there is a structure to every day. We eat at the same time, they sleep at the same time. Um, Everything's done at the same time. And it actually, believe it or not, makes my life a little easier because everything happens at the same time every day. So in my case, yes, it's the weekends are just as structured. If you maybe you don't need to structure your weekends as much, it sort of depends on how busy you are and what you need to accomplish. But if you're finding that you're not meeting your goals and you're not on track and you're not where you want to be, get to work. The weekends are free time. Anybody else here? I can tell sea stories if you want, Teresa.
Why not?
Why not? Okay. I can start with the story of how my husband and I met. This is a fun one. My husband and I met in Japan, and I don't know if you saw that the logo for our company, Franstead Strategies, it had a black dragon on it. And in Japanese culture, dragons are like water creatures, and we were both in the Navy. And dragons are also, black dragons specifically, are also symbols of wisdom and experience, which we hope that someday we may have. But so we met in Japan, and kind of by accident, even though we were supposed to be on the same ship. When you go to Japan, through the Navy, you're on these rotator flights. So it's not like you're taking a commercial airline. They're big military flights that they pack full of tons of people. And you go to the Seattle airport and you spend a night in the Seattle airport. Oh, I got another question. I'll finish this story. You spend a night in the Seattle airport, and your military flight leaves from the Seattle airport at like 3:00 in the morning. And then you come to Japan, and Japan's like a day behind. So you're crossing the international date line. And I don't know if you've ever been over to Asia, it's a rough flight. So I was over there a couple of weeks ahead of my husband, and our ship was off the coast of Australia. So we were in Japan waiting to be sent to Australia. And he stayed up all night in the US in order to be able to reset his clock when he got to Japan. But on his flight, there was a screaming baby who screamed the entire 12-hour flight. So he didn't get a single moment of sleep. So he got to Japan, and you're supposed to check in with the person when you get to Japan to let them know. I'm sure you've all heard the term AWOL, absent without leave. So people are supposed to check in. You're supposed to check in with them to make sure they know where you are. So he got to his hotel room and slept for like 26 hours, and they couldn't find him. And I was the only one there on the ship. And so they told me to go find this guy. I'm like 22 years old. This is my first time to Japan. I don't speak any Japanese. I don't know where this guy could be staying. So I started calling around to all these different hotels to see if I could find him. I messaged him on Facebook. I mean, I did all this different kinds of stuff to find him. And on Facebook, he's from Texas, and he went to Texas A&M University. And on Facebook, he can't really see him in his Facebook profile picture because he has this enormous cowboy hat over his face and his head. Like, I mean, literally, this is like 10-gallon hat. And so I'm like, well, it could be this guy. So I'm sending messages to all these different people. Finally, the hotel that I was in was a Navy hotel. And I asked them if he was staying there. And they're like, of course, we can't give out that information. I literally went down to the desk and I was like, my ship wants to know where this guy is. I need his room number. I just assumed he was there, even though I didn't know if he was or not. Sure enough, he was there. I went over to his room and I woke him up and from his 27-hour sleep. And I was so angry. I knocked on the door and he opened it and he goes, Kara. I'd left probably 30 messages for him. And I said, Matt, where have you been? And so that was the first time we met. And after that, we were really good friends. And then eventually he asked me out on a date, but that's another story. I will answer the rest of these questions. And then if we have more time, I can tell you about when he asked me out on the first date. That was pretty funny. An example of how you evaluate your day. If you mean planning or do you mean planning or looking back? I can do both. Planning ahead of my day. For me, there's, with kids, there's a lot of certainty to nap time. So I have an 9-month-old and she sleeps from 9 to 11 and 1 to 3. So I know exactly when I'm going to pick, when I'm going to feed her, when I'm going to put her down, all those kinds of things. So all of those things are already structured into my day. So I start with kind of the non-negotiables. My kids are up at 7:30, or they're up earlier than that, but they're allowed to come out of their room at 7:30. So I know breakfast has to be ready by that time. And there's all these things that are structured into my day to make it kind of easier, and I work around them. So while my kids are sleeping or the baby's sleeping from 9 to 11, and then all of my kids sleep or have quiet time between 1 and 3, those 4 hours every day, I'm going. I am working. Everything I do is just crammed into those 2 hours that I can't have kids to do. If I have phone calls I need to make, or if I need to call our back office, if I need to talk to clients, if I need to do any of those kinds of things, it's always done in those time periods during those 4 hours a day. I can do them so if a client can't meet in the middle, they have to meet at noon or whatever, then that's something that I have to work out with my husband. I'm talking about COVID times right now. It's a little bit different, not COVID, but in COVID times, I have to kind of work out with my husband. Do you have a meeting at this time? All right, well, we're comparing 3 different calendars, and because I can't share my calendar with him and he can't share his calendar with me because of privacy reasons. But, we go through that whole song and dance. And so I schedule everything around these time blocks. So I plan to be working, but during those sleep times, I know when my kids are going to eat. And so everything else I fit in between. And then when the kids go to bed at 7 o'clock every night, and after that is when I spend my time, studying, or my husband and I have a few minutes to catch up and chat, or we're cleaning the kitchen or whatever the case may be. That's when we get all of that stuff done. He's usually working after 7 too. So that's how I evaluate my day. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the rocks. This is a Navy one, but I don't know if this is something that non-Navy people have heard of. If you take a jar and you fill it with big rocks, really big rocks, and then you fill it with little pebbles, the little pebbles fall in between the big rocks, and you can fill the jar full of pebbles. And then if you pour in sand, the sand goes between the pebbles and the big rocks, and you can fill the jar with sand. And then you pour in water, and you can fill the whole jar up with water. But if you put the sand in first, you can't get the big rocks in, or the little rocks, or the water. And if you try and put the little rocks in first and fill it up, you can't get the big rocks in at the same time. So always start with the big rocks, those big things in your day that there's no negotiating, there's no moving around. So for me, it's those nap schedules, the nap schedules, the kids' schedules, and I do have a lot of friends who have kids who say, my kids don't work well with schedules. And I'm always like, maybe they don't need to. maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't matter. Some people, they don't have the kind of life where their kids need to be on schedules. My kids know exactly what time of day that things are going to happen. And there's no arguing about bedtime. There's no arguing about nap time. Um, they know they know when we're going to eat. They know when snack time is. And it makes my life so much easier because I don't have to worry about, you know, taking an hour to put my kid to bed or whatever the case may be. You're going to sleep. It's sleep time, same as it is every day. And that's a big rock. So these are really important pieces of my day. And so when the kid's asleep and I just go in and put the baby down and walk out and the baby goes right to sleep, I don't have to rock the baby to sleep. I don't have to come back and try and, I can just go right to work. So those are um, the how I fit everything in. The big rocks first, then little rocks, the sand and the water, um, for my analogy there. Um, Ways to strategize when you're having trouble focusing on tasks because you're so overwhelmed. I've heard a couple of different ways to do this, and I think that some of this is personal. Um, I think a lot of this is personal. So when we came back from break, like a holiday break, when my first day back to work after the holiday break, or after maternity leave, that's always super overwhelming. Your first day back, you're just, I mean, why am I here? What am I doing? I have so much work to do. I always start with the things that I can control. So cleaning out my email, but my inbox, for example, my work email, this is junk, this is junk, this is junk. And then you're left with only the important emails. And then you can prioritize what's important. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Eisenhower quadrants. I think this is pretty well known. I have it actually on my desk right here. And this is the urgent and not important. I don't want to go over this if everybody knows it, but this quadrant is important and urgent. Do it. If it's important and urgent, do it. I don't know if you can see this. If it's important but not urgent, plan it. If it's urgent but not important, delegate it. If it's not urgent and not important, eliminate it. I think this was Eisenhower who came up with this, but this is something I keep on my desk and it kind of helps me. And I'm pretty sure you can Google this. And it helps me when I get kind of overwhelmed and I see something. I get trapped sometimes in these urgent and not important things that I could delegate, but I see them and I want to do them. And I think this is a big trap for a lot of people. But don't forget, how valuable your time is, and do these things first, these important and urgent things. So that's kind of how I clean out my inbox, and then that's how I organize all of my emails. That's just sitting on my desk there. Hope that helps. When you're overwhelmed, trouble staying focused, coffee helps. Other than my quadrant, coffee helps a lot. How do you accomplish the schedule for kids? This is a huge mystery to me. If you mean like my schedule for the kids, like their particular schedule, my mom was a huge help in this one. This is what she did. And so when I had my first child, she was like, you will feel so much better if you get this kid on a schedule. Because I was working, part-time at the time, and I was pretty overwhelmed with, I think when you have your first child, there's a huge transition period there. And I was pretty overwhelmed. So, and I do think, my mom always says you have to get that first kid right. And if you accomplish the schedule with the first kid, the others will just follow. It's not as much work. You have to put a lot of work in at the beginning, to set the schedule up. And then when it comes to like babies sleeping through the night and stuff like that, that's another thing that people just expect that's going to happen. And it doesn't if you don't put in the work. This is another thing that you just have to put in the work and make happen. And I can attest to this because with I had my third baby at the beginning of COVID. And I just thought, Well, I have more time now. I'm not, doing all the things I normally do. I won't bother with too much of a schedule for her. There's two other kids I got to worry about. We'll just go with the flow. My first child slept through the night at like 4 months. My second child slept through the month through the night at 6 weeks. This child didn't sleep through the night until 6 months because I never got on it. Um, I just let it go. And my husband and I were so stressed out when I had to start my master's program because my baby wasn't sleeping when she was supposed to. And when I didn't have the master's program, I could spend a lot of time with her. And I did. I figured, well, I have the time, might as well spend as much time as possible as I can with the baby. When it came time for me to start my master's program, we had to put the work in to actually get her on the schedule to sleep because I didn't have as much time to fuss around with her sleeping and her schedule. So once you set it in place, you do have to do some work at the beginning. Once you set it in place, it kind of follows itself. Now, does that mean that my kids won't stay up until midnight if I let them? Of course they would, and when we have friends over who stay late and things like that, of course, there's wiggle room for that kind of thing. But when it comes to having an actual schedule for the kids, it's, I mean, of paramount importance. It really clears up my schedule for so many other things when you don't have to fuss around with the kids. And we just say these are the rules. It is what it is. A lot of my friends too will say like, I'm so exhausted fixing, one kid wants to eat this and the other kid doesn't like hot dogs, so I have to make him macaroni and cheese. Like, I make one dinner, or my husband, so we tag team. We make one dinner. If you're not hungry, you don't have to eat. But this isn't a restaurant. I'm not going to sit here and make 5 or 6 different meals because this isn't something you like. Um, and my kids' favorite foods are like tomatoes and smoked salmon. It's weird. But it is what it is. If this is what I'm going to eat, this is what you're going to eat. And kids want to follow and do what their parents do anyways. So these are the rules. So I think we started that pretty young, and that's how we did it. So that's how we accomplished it. I think it is a lot of work at the beginning, but it pays dividends in the end as far as your time.
Great. So I think Kara, we're so grateful for all your words of wisdom, your experience. And I'm sure even those of us who are as old as your mother learned a lot. So I just wanted to invite everyone to please check. We haven't posted our next event, but we will be having a fantastic event in February that we're inviting all of you to attend. In the meantime, we'll be speaking with Kara of how to, maybe we can post the recording of this seminar or something like that so you can refer to them later on. But in any case, Kara, any other words? But really, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will. I'll send you this workbook that my husband and I use for our goals and planning and kind of the process that we use. And if you have any questions, I can give you my email as well, Teresa.
Oh, that's so generous. So I'm sure, I think people keep on asking questions. So definitely they will be very grateful to get your contact information. So with that, thank you again for everyone for attending this seminar, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thanks.